LinkedIn. We are here in live. I am so happy to have a amazing panel join me. So I wanted to tell you about how we came up with this topic. Larissa had done a post about artificial harmony, and it so resonated with me. And I thought it would be so useful to bring that conversation to LinkedIn Live, because I know that there's so many people that experience this, where you're in a meeting and maybe you think about an idea or you're thinking about making a contribution, but maybe last time you were shut down and, like you're playing nice. You want to make sure you're avoiding conflict for whatever reason. And, how to handle that and what to do and how to identify it, I thought would be a really useful conversation, especially for women out there who I know from conversations experience a lot of that. Not saying that men don't, they do, but in general, I know that this is an important topic for people. So everyone joining us live, please let us know where you're coming from. Also, share any comments or questions along the way. We'd like to engage and answer any questions that you have. I put together this panel based on, if I had a question about artificial harmony, who would I seek out? And so these are the people I would seek out, and Larissa, specifically about leadership, Gil about employee experience, Gurpreet about, employees, Melissa from that sales perspective, Amber from a recruiting perspective. So that's how I assembled this group of people who I am all blessed to know. And so what we'll do is go around and have everyone just introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. And then we'll go from there. So Larissa, you're up first.
Hey, so I may be the source of an echo. That's why I'm muting, but I am Larissa Haynes, and I am a talent optimization consultant, and I focus on team cohesion and team building with executive coaching and leadership development. So all a bunch of fancy words to say I focus on people parts of business. And I am the founder of Quivit Consulting. So that's my jam. Yeah.
Awesome. Gil, why don't you tell us about yourself?
My name is Gil Cohen. I'm also a consultant about the people parts of the business, but from my own different angle, focused around employee experience and the employee lens, with this special emphasis on behaviors, out of the greater Toronto area. And I'm just grateful to be here. I think this is just a really important topic that happens more often than a lot of leaders have any idea. And so we need to break that bubble and make sure that they understand what's really happening in their businesses.
That's such a good point. I agree with you. I think people don't realize when it's happening that, it's only the person, that individual, that realizes that they're kind of holding back, and nobody would know unless they specifically sought out that information. So that's a really excellent point. Amber, tell us about yourself.
Oh, sure. I'm in recruiting now, but I've been a salesperson all my life. So now I just tell people I sell sales to salespeople, but basically helping people find their job or rule out their job. Right. So love it. Really honored to be here, and thanks for letting me.
Well, thank you for joining me. Amber, I met, like early into my job hunt. And as soon as I got on the phone with her, she's one of those people that I was like, wow, you're pretty amazing. I'm just going to keep you. I don't want that particular job, but you're like my people. So like, she's been my people ever since. And now I get to work with her. So it's pretty amazing.
It is rad. The job finally opened up.
You're up.
Hi, so my name is Gurpreet, and I'm an HR expert by day and career coach by night. So my company, HR Superhero, we work with small, medium-sized businesses to attract and retain talent. And then on the GKM coaching, career and job search coaching, basically helping people land jobs in 30 days and make more money by personal branding on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Melissa, you are up.
Hey, so my name is Melissa Meyer. I'm a 20-something year veteran of outside sales. I'm also a meeting facilitator, and I do a lot of volunteer work facilitating meetings specifically around inclusion and diversity, bringing out the best in groups. And everywhere I worked, I've gained a reputation as being a little bit of a firebrand that, I will say things that people might be uncomfortable saying. And that doesn't mean I'm comfortable saying it. It just means somebody's got to do it. So I have a lot of experience and just a personal passion for bringing out the best in groups and having comfortable conflict, if you will.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. So, when we look at this topic, are you afraid to rock the boat? And we're talking about artificial harmony. Tell me, and I'll ask whoever wants to volunteer first, what does artificial harmony mean to you?
So I would love to jump in on this one.
Yeah, of course.
Pick me. So this is actually a concept that comes from, I don't know if you've read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, right? So Pat Lencioni, which I just learned this year how to pronounce his name properly. In his framework, the second sort of tenet of it is conflict. And it's not conflict in the way that we think of like mean-spirited fighting, right? That's at one end of a continuum or a spectrum. And at the other end, so the exact opposite of that, like duke it out fighting, making it personal, is artificial harmony. So what we're really thinking of there is that walking on eggshells, avoiding conversations, making yourself smaller so that you don't be seen, right? So it's that tentativeness that and it's the same kind of energy almost, right, as that mean-spiritedness, but it's turned inward and made smaller rather than exploding and coming out. So it can be just as destructive, if not more, because it becomes festering, it becomes toxic, right? There's that toxic bloom that can happen in teams because it becomes collusion. It becomes things happening behind closed doors rather than happening out in the light. So for me, that's what artificial harmony is, where it looks really shiny and nice and it looks like everyone's getting along. And then there's all sorts of pockets of, or bitching happening.
Yeah.
Can I add?
And that's what resonated with me so much about your post. Of course. Yeah, Melissa.
So my day job is very aggressive enterprise sales, like B2B sales, a very competitive environment, very, used to be male dominated. Hopefully we're changing that. But we've all had the experience where there's a meeting, like a staff meeting, team meeting, people walk out, and then you go to the meeting after the meeting. Like then you have your real meeting and it breaks up in groups and there's gossip and there's, what do you think Amber meant by that? I don't know. Did she say that to you? And, there's all this just smooth surface, but just right under the surface is a huge mess and conjecture and gossiping and rumors. And it's such a drain of resources, money resources, emotional resources, time resources. And I'm somebody who loves efficiency. So that's why, I'm usually the one that's like, whoa, we need to all go back in there because we didn't have the meeting that we need to have. But that's a symptom of false harmony. There's all sorts of stuff happening under the surface.
And there's the cost is great. There's a cost to the individual, but there's also the bigger cost to the team, right? So if not everyone is able to bring their ideas to the forefront for consideration, and there could be some great valuable ideas in there, then you're losing something along the way. And but there's definitely a difference between healthy debate, healthy, conflict, and toxic, like mean-spirited sort of conflict, or gaslighting, right? Where everyone is sort of over here and there's conversations going on and that concept of just like creating a different reality based off of perception, which I think is important to sort of talk about as well, because that goes into it, it impacts whether you have that artificial harmony or not. Chris here says, sometimes it's nice to avoid conflict, though.
Hey, buddy,
So,
I owe you a
what
phone call. Thanks for showing up.
From my experience, anytime you try to avoid conflict in an unhealthy way, it will come at a cost. So it might feel good to avoid conflict and feel nice to avoid conflict, but there will be a cost. What I also want to add to this is this all reminds me of when I first learned X number of years ago in school about the stages of teams, of forming, storming, norming, and performing. And the fact that the names are a little bit confusing because a team that's storming actually will have this artificial harmony. A team that's storming may actually sit there and it looks like everybody's getting along. It looks like, oh, great idea, and it looks like you're adding to things. Whereas when you're performing, that's where you actually have built that trust, that psychological safety, where you can have a healthy conflict, meaning, it's not a conflict of personalities, it's a conflict of ideas. It's a conflict of what you're trying to accomplish, and you're able to have that conversation. But the problem for far too many organizations is that you have a leadership that doesn't have the emotional intelligence to allow the team to get to that point. They get stuck with this artificial harmony that just becomes a part of the experience and almost a part of the culture.
Well, yeah, I mean, sorry. Go on, Amber.
I was just going to say, do you think that you see more artificial harmony in less diverse groups, or do you think you see more artificial harmony in more diverse groups? And whether the leader embraces diversity of thought, background, perspective, lens, etc. I think that leader will be more likely to welcome debate. Just my thought, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I wanted to jump in here a little bit. Gil brings up a great point, but there's a flip side. Sometimes it's not leaders. I remember this law firm that I worked at. It wasn't the leaders. It wasn't the management team. It was a couple of the lawyers. They were like, you couldn't go into a meeting and you always knew who it was. The other lawyers used to stay quiet. There was these two lawyers that were, everyone stayed quiet. And then I was the HR, and then I had to go, and as Melissa said, then you had to go. I noticed no one's talking except for two people. I then, after that meeting, had to go individually to the lawyers who weren't talking to get their input and their feedback. And I'm like, why weren't you talking? They're like, well, the other two, this is their history. They go into these meetings and they just keep objecting to whatever the management's saying. So now the other people voices are not being heard, or they don't want to, because, well, two are being, they were like bullies. They used to bully in the meetings because they were just wrong. And I agree with Melissa, like, then you have side meetings, and then all that time, the whole purpose of the meeting was to have it, like, to be productive, get the info, and then build out whatever the meeting objective was. But you're not getting that objective if there's people in the meeting that either are bullies, intimidating, they belittle other people, and then you created this environment unknowingly in the meeting where no one wants to talk because there's two people that are just gonna take over the meeting and object to everything the management has to say. So I've been into two types of culture. I've been in a culture where it's not the management, it's actually a couple of the people, and then it could be, and the other side, been on the other side of the table where it's a couple of the managers who just don't want to hear and they just want to talk at the employees. But I agree with Melissa. It is a cost. You're losing out. It's not productive. It's taking everyone's time. And then what did you accomplish?
So I agree with that. I mean, both sides are losing out.
Yeah.
So there's a thread that links all of what you said with something that Gil said and the question that Amber brought forward. And I just love when things like this happen. So when we're looking at teams, leaders, and people through a behavioral lens, right? So I think Gil and I both work with a lot of human behavior data. And we know that those two people that you were mentioning, they love challenge and they're going to duke it out. They don't even know that they're in conflict. There's other people in the room that feel like they just want to turn into ether and get sucked out because they're wired to kind of look at it differently. So in Gil's point of having self-aware leaders, what that does is it lets self-awareness trickle down through the organization. And when you've got leaders who put self-awareness and EQ as a high priority, those two people would understand that that behavior would be impacting other people negatively, right? So, and then to Amber's question is, does this show up on diverse teams, non-diverse teams? And really, when we're looking at thought behavior diversity, right? Background and thought is having a room full of people who naturally come at conflict from a different perspective, making sure that everybody in the room knows exactly where those people come from and what that impact is going to be. And then structuring and facilitating that to make sure that everyone's thoughts and voices are heard in a healthy and constructive way. So it works when you're aware of it all. It doesn't work when you're not. And I think that's the biggest one. So yeah,
we had to basically put meeting rules around the meetings because they weren't being productive because of the two individuals. And basically then I had to teach the managing lawyer how to conduct these meetings with her lawyers, because then she wasn't being productive because of two. So then, yeah, like it basically came down to that. And then we had to put this whole policy on and rules. And again, like, you had to create all this because a few people that I wouldn't say that they were really aware. They just, lawyers have a very toxic culture because they're just all, from my experience, there were just few people that kind of wanted to. It's like that TV show Suits. They want to take over the firm. So they had their own agenda going on. But diversity, like diverse groups, somebody was mentioning here that there's less artificial harmony in diverse teams. I can see it being true, and I can see it also where there's less diverse, where you can see it more. If you're like, for example, when I worked in manufacturing, one of the manufacturing companies I worked in, I was the only female, and then I was invited to come into the management meeting. I was the only female. Yeah, I didn't right away jump on talking because I was like, I don't know, should I say something? Are they gonna like not attack me, but just like they may not agree with what I'm saying, because they were all men and I was the only female. So it took me a little bit of a time, and then I started giving my inputs and stuff like that, and then it was fine. But at initial stages, I was intimidated to speak.
Yeah, and there are a lot of studies out there about this, that if you're less than 30%, right, of like the room is the same as you, that there is more hesitation to speak and a little bit longer before you actually feel comfortable or have that psychological safety to really be wholly present, right? There are some studies that say that. I think we should move on to the next question, because we're a little bit into it, and we promised to deliver a lot of stuff. So when you are in this artificial harmony, how do you identify it and how to approach it? So who wants to take that first? I choose Larissa.
Okay, so I was totally reading that new comment that came in, and I didn't listen to the end of your question. Sorry, I didn't think I was gonna go next.
No worries. So, how do you identify it, and how do you approach artificial harmony? So,
thank you. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
We all did share a little bit about it, and Melissa did a good job at that too. Of the biggest way that I would say to how do we identify it is if you are stunted in your innovation, right? So and this goes into the cost as well. If you're getting really stuck in moving things forward, if it always seems like it's taking a lot of time for every project to move to the next level, but everyone seems okay, you probably have some artificial harmony happening because people aren't trusting each other. And it's not trust as in, I trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. It's trust in, I trust that who I am is going to be held okay in your space, right? Like, so when you're stuck in innovation, stuck in productivity, that can be a really good sign of it. How do we address it? That was the second half, right? So my number one kind of answer to everything is curiosity. Jen knows this.
Yeah.
I believe that until we are willing to get curious with each other and really hear and know our coworkers and not assume who our coworkers are and what their motivations are, it won't go away. So that's, I think the question I got stuck on was, the lack of emotional intelligence. That's part of the EQ stuff of knowing myself. So I'm really comfortable with this and knowing how I impact others. Wow, the rest of my team totally doesn't take that. The impact of me is not my intent, right? So knowing your impact and your intent and getting really curious about how other people do things, how they take action, how they make decisions, how they communicate, all of that is the first step in undoing it, for my opinion.
Yeah. Did anyone else have any thoughts they wanted to share on that?
I've just had so many, toxic environments. I think one thing that happens is that people get promoted up a ladder. Like somebody who's a great salesperson becomes a sales manager, or somebody who has an MBA gets installed in an admin or administrative role above people, and they've never had like training in how to facilitate a successful meeting, how to recognize X and Y and Z, and how to have healthy conflict. They've got an MBA or whatever qualifies them, but this is something that's just been overlooked for decades. And the secret meetings, for me, the way that it always showed up is am I comfortable? How do I feel when I need to say, how do I feel when I disagree? Like Larissa makes an assertion that we're going to have this meeting every Tuesday, and I feel strongly that that's not the best idea. What literally in my gut, in my heart, or my throat, or wherever you feel it in your body, how do I feel when I step into her office? Or how do I feel when I know I disagree and I want to say something, but something is stopping me? For me, that's always a big sign of, lack of trust, all of those things on the triangle. like trust is the first thing, right? Anyway, that's how it's always shown up. And then, and then lots of gossip and conjecture and rumors and all of that just spin and spin and spin.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. And I love specifically the way you said, how do you feel?
Yeah.
When you need to share something and you're getting ready to disagree with someone, how do you feel? And do you feel like if you disagree that it's going to be okay?
Yeah,
Marissa, you're on mute.
Like that's
Exactly.
right there.
Yeah, exactly. Or,
That's
or
what
the
it is.
other, I've worked in places where you literally had to go and find strategic alliances. Like before the meeting, you would have to go like door to door and be like, okay, Gil, I think we should do this. What do you think? Yeah. Are you on? Okay. I mean, it was like an episode of Survivor, right? Like just to, to get something done in a meeting. Like there would be all these side meetings and pre-meetings and post meetings that just becomes such a huge waste. To me, that was always like the biggest sign. And we've all had, we've all reported to people who've said, I have an open door. And then the first time you walk in there, you find out, wow, yeah, it's open for what? Not open for nice things. No.
You think it's open, it's closed, buddy.
Yeah, right.
But
Melissa makes a
I
great
think
point.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Reed had a thought.
it was just adding on to what Melissa saying. She said, like, how you feel, your energy, right? You will know your energy. I know a lot of people say, don't listen to your gut, but in this type of situation, your energy doesn't lie. How you feel in that moment, whatever you're feeling, the emotions, that's the first indication, right? Like if you're gonna step into a meeting and you're intimidated, that's your first sign right there, right? Second, it's also now if I was the manager conducting a meeting and no one's participating, that's a red flag right there. Why isn't someone talking, right? And you gotta know these things as a manager. Like if you're not even a manager, if I'm somebody that's leading a meeting and no one's engaging and I'm talking and talking and talking, I don't like talking to myself. But if no one's engaging, then I need to take a step back and ask why, right? That goes back to what Larissa said. Be curious. So why isn't someone engaging? And you'll be very surprised if you actually did a one-on-one meeting and asked individually why they weren't participating in a meeting. You will learn so many things. It could be so many different reasons. that you possibly can't even think of. But if you actually talk to your people, and I love what Gail always says, don't talk at them, talk with them, to them, sit them down, hear them. The best way to resolve a problem, and even this type of problem, is ask them. Ask. And be open
Yes.
to receiving the information. The problem is a lot of people will ask, but they're not open to receiving it. If you're not open to receiving what the person's gonna say, then don't ask. Then you're just creating an even bigger problem, because there's no point. And as even when I've noticed this, even when I'm coaching, that's the first thing I ask someone. If you're gonna ask me a question, then be open to receive it in a form, in whatever form I'm going to give it to you, because I'm not going to coach you to give you answers what you want to hear. But I'm going to tell you what the reality is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to agree with you, because that's not my job. So if you're going to ask, then you have to be open to receiving whatever is going to come your way.
That's an excellent point. And I know Gil is going to want to talk about psychological safety, right?
Well, I want to add to what Melissa and what Gurpreet were saying, right? Because if you say I have an open door policy, or it's okay to disagree, or I'm looking for disagreement, and then the first time somebody does that, you smack them down as a result of doing that or embarrassing them, it won't happen again. And I really appreciate Melissa's point about, how do you know it's happening? Well, a certain self-awareness. How do I feel when I disagree with somebody? Am I comfortable? Do I have that psychological safety? But it also points to the awareness that most times I've seen this artificial harmony and learned about it from employees and experienced it. There were usually a certain imbalance of awareness of it, that there's a certain number of people around the table that feel this discomfort, feel this disharmony. But the artificial part about it is that there's some people who think it's actual harmony. The people who are blissfully unaware of the impact they have on others, blissfully unaware of the fact that I'm the hippo. When I make the first point, everybody's just following in line behind that. Whereas there's all of these other people around the table who are totally uncomfortable from saying anything. So it's sort of this imbalance of awareness that the employee has to be aware of. Okay, I feel this disharmony. I feel this lack of safety. But then most often, again, it is the leader, manager, whomever, who creates a disharmony, but they have no idea. They think when I say, anybody have any questions? Anybody have any problems? And everybody's silent. They think that's agreement. They think that's, hey, everybody's behind me. They're all for it. Nobody disagreed with me. Nobody openly disagreed with me. Well, not to mention the last time somebody openly disagreed with you, they lost their job within 2 weeks. But hey, no one disagreed with you this time. So that's one of the things that I want to add on to what Melissa and Gurpreet were saying about.
You know what? Gil brought a great point when he said, well, the last time someone disagreed with you, they lost their job. How many people have lost their jobs just for speaking up? How many people? I'm in HR, so I probably can rant on for this forever, because I see so much on the back end, because I'm HR. The minute an employee speaks up, what happens? I don't want that person on my team. Manager wants it gone. I've seen it all the time. My sister spoke up. I actually coached her. I go, if you're gonna do this, they're terminating you. She was getting bullied by one of the senior managers. And she's like, no, I don't care if I get terminated. She voiced her concern to HR, terminated. And then she calls him and like, I told you that was going to happen. I see this happen a lot in larger organizations, right? And I'm HR. So, I see everything, and I agree. Like when you hear a lot of people talking even on LinkedIn, and I'm sitting there, yeah, man, this happens, right? It's sad that we create these policies. Melissa said open door policies, but how much is it really open, right? Then you say open communication. Okay, so when I do communicate, see ya, terminated, right? Like how many people have been terminated just to speak up? Just the other day, someone told me the same incident happened to them at this company. And 2 weeks, it's not that she spoke up, but she was just talking about things that are not working properly, how we can fix the problem and create these different departments to actually work together. It's actually going to benefit the company. 2 weeks later, her manager wrote her up because, oh, you don't know how to talk to people, your behavior. And she's like, what? She was so confused. And she's like, you know what? This company's not for me. And she left. So you may have all these great policies and all that stuff. I always say walk the talk. I don't care about your policies. If you can't exhibit and walk the talk, how good are those policies? You might as well rip them up. But second of all, you're losing talent. If you're not allowing people to speak up and voice, it's not even a voice. If I can't go to a meeting and I can't speak up, I'm not going to work for you, or I'm not going to be productive. Now you're losing out, right? My efficiencies are going to be low. I'm not going to be productive. And eventually I'm going to leave, because who wants to work in an environment that you can't even talk, or you can't voice your opinions, or you can't voice an idea without being smacked down by your manager?
And I think one thing that's really important with that too is that you've now learned that's what it is. That's what it's like. So when you leave, you're bringing that perspective with you into a fresh organization. So even if the company you're going to actually has authentic harm, like where people are getting along and do know how to counter with each other and do push back. So I have some really great clients that I work with, and that is their culture. Their senior leaders come into these team cohesion meetings that I lead, and they're like, here is my stuff. I am garbage at these things. You can call me out on it when I am, hot and yelling at things. Stop me. We do a lot of work on how do we do that. But the new people that come in, it takes a little bit for them to be like, wait. Like, is this for real? Like, what's happening here? Because my last 3 companies, I spoke up and I got in trouble. And then that's another way that it can happen, is that a pot of artificial harmony is you get a manager in who's like, no, don't say anything. We're not going to talk about that, right? So be aware, as we're jumping into job seeking, is that if you're coming from an artificial harmony culture, there's going to be great questions that you can ask to kind of poke holes in and around it. But know that if you get there, have that optimistic stance that maybe this time it isn't like that. And there are some ways that you can test the waters and test your leadership without maybe jumping right in, but bringing that sort of PTSD with us about it can then just taint the waters in the new place.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point. You're going to move on. And is that the best thing to do? Because, if you're in this, you're experiencing this artificial harmony, it, you don't feel comfortable speaking up. Is the best thing to do to just move on? Or is there anything you can do internally? What you guys are the experts. So that's why I wanted to assemble this panel. You're in this place and you're in a meeting and you want to disagree, but your stomach is turning and you're like, I don't want to do it. Like, it's not, because you sort of feel out, what the response is going to be like. What do you do? What's a good strategy?
For me, it depends on the context. Am I the CEO or am I an SDR? Right? Because it depends on what am I capable of doing? What control do I really have over the situation? If I'm a frontline employee, still trying to work my way up, prove myself, as much as I love the rebel, I love the outlier, I love that kind of person, the firebrand that's going to go out there and fight the system. Ultimately, if it's that embedded in the system, I have a hard time recommending that for somebody. I would feel terribly pushing somebody in that direction. But if you're the CEO sitting in that and that's happening, well, like Larissa said, start with curiosity. Start with trying to understand why. Because odds are you're the reason why it's like that, but start with trying to understand that. But I would say it all depends on who you are and in the influence and the impact you can genuinely have within the system.
I would add on to that is the best advice I ever got in the beginning of my career was from a female director. I was actually interviewing her. She was with the company for 20 years. And I asked her, what advice would you give a young female like me? And she said, never be afraid to speak up. In the meeting, never be scared to speak up. She goes, first of all, you never know what can come out of it. Majority of the time, it could be good. So never be afraid to speak up. And honestly speaking, ever since she said that, I was 28, 28 or 27. I've carried that with me ever since that moment. I have spoken up. I don't hesitate, but I think here's what I've done. I don't go into attack mode. Because I'm HR, I've coached other people to do this too, is you start with the positive, what you like, and then you go into addressing the things you don't like. So you're flipping the switch. If you go right into negativity, no one's going to perceive it properly the way you want them to. But if you go with the approach, talk about what you like so far, and then say, here's some areas that either you don't understand, or how about you walk me through this? I'm thinking this way. What do you think? So you make it into a team environment. That's the approach that I've used. That's the approach I coach managers on using, and individuals. As for an individual now being a job seeker and going into a company, how can you identify? Glassdoor. We have tools now that we can learn so much. I even tell CEOs of the company, Glassdoor reviews don't lie. Yeah, some people may amplify it, but there's an underlying core issue. If 20 people have one common thing in the same thread, there's some truth to those views. And I say the same thing to job candidates. You got to read the reviews and be able to tweak, be able to read in between the lines. I'm not saying they're all 100% correct, but underlining issue, if you read it, you will be able to find the underlining issue in it. And what now it's going to happen is, if you read it, then if you know they're all bad reviews, you shouldn't go into. I think you shouldn't even entertain the company. But if you do go into a company, the best thing you can ever do is ask questions. I found that when I'm interviewing, in my 15 plus years of HR experience, also in recruitment, a lot of people don't ask questions. Candidates don't ask questions. So how are you making that sound decision if the company's for you, the manager's the right fit for you, the organization's the right fit for you? As much as no one's going to lie, you ask me why I love working for this company, I'm not going to lie. That's not the right question to ask. There's so many other ways to approach it. There's one question I always tell every candidate to ask when I'm coaching on the other side of the table. You should always ask this one question. And it will kind of give you an idea of how they will answer it. And you as a candidate, how would you take their feedback is, do you have any concerns about my ability to perform this role? You'll be stunned on how many managers get stunned on this question. And then they but it would tell you the kind of manager they are, the way they answer the question. I've seen great managers lose their cool, or I've seen on the flip side, I've seen managers that were really open and saying, here's where you have all the great experience, here's where I'm not too sure about, and allow the open discussion to happen. So I think in the interview, you gotta ask the right questions.
Totally. And Amber, I think you had a thought to share.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. Can you tell I'm starting to get excited? So two things to build off of Gurpreet's answer, which is really, really awesome. One is I always tell people, look at Glassdoor, throw out the really, really awesome, throw out the really, really bad, and then find what's in the middle, and that's going to tell you your truth, right? So I hate to use the phrase drink the Kool-Aid, but it definitely is true, right? There's a lot of us that did, and then there's going to be some sour apples, but go in the middle. Other thing is, of course, I'm hiring mostly for salespeople. So if salespeople don't come with really awesome questions, I question their ability to sell. Any other type of role, though, I will always coach in it. 100% ask at least 3 or 4 questions to ask the interviewer, not only to clarify their question, but maybe even why they're asking. Those are really great things to ask and to get some insight as to what they're looking for. And then at the end, throw in your questions as if you're the interviewer. And then the other thing I wanted like from way back. I've been sitting on it for a while. The tactic, right? How do you know, right? If so, you think you're a manager of a group that's got artificial harmony and nobody's speaking up in a meeting. I read about it and it's so cool, right? You can elect one person to be the official disagreeer in each meeting, and it changes. Different disagreeer, or you can hire Melissa. But that's a great tactic to actually get a practice of asking questions and skepticism in those meetings. Thanks for letting.
I love that. I love that.
I'll go real quick. How do you tell? And I'm enterprise seller. I'm all like, so yes, I ask a lot of questions. I am interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me. And if, that's just how that works. Could you describe your company culture? How do you handle conflict? Those are two big ones that I always ask. And if they're like, what? We don't have any conflict. Okay. Nice knowing you. Like, that's just not true. Another thing you can do if you're in the market is you can, if you're a heavy LinkedIn user, like you can search the company name and find people who worked there but don't work there now, and just shoot them a message, and they will be ridiculously honest, and you'll be able to tell through their tone, like, did they just get one bad meal, or is this really a bad restaurant? And to the reviews piece, I love spicy food, so if I read a bunch of reviews and they all say it's too spicy, okay, that's not a problem for me. If I read a bunch of reviews and they say it's a dirty kitchen, okay, now we have a problem. So, don't just go by the number of stars, like actually dig in, like just to reiterate what Amber said, really makes a big difference. I'm not for everyone. I'm not a great fit everywhere. And that's fine, because it's better to be more specific and be a great fit than, be faking who you are. The other thing that, regarding firebrand, what I've done, and it doesn't always work. I mean, obviously choose your battles, right? So if I'm a single mom, there's times when I just needed that paycheck more than I needed to speak up, period. And we've all been in that place. If I'm comfortable speaking up, I'll ask things like, Amber, can I play devil's advocate? Or, Larissa, this is a great plan. What if we took a few minutes and just shot some holes in it? So that, and I wouldn't use someone's name. I mean, that's if I was reporting, that's if you guys were my boss. Because then it sort of prepares the person for, okay, I might hear something I don't want to hear. And they could say, no, this is a done deal. I mean, I'll ask, like, is this a done deal? Is the decision made? And if it is, then I'm not going to stick my neck out. So that's another thing. If you're facilitating a meeting, is setting that operating agreement. Is this a dialogic meeting, or is this a decision meeting? Like, are we kicking things around and up for discussion, or are you announcing a decision that's already been made? Like, that's some good information to have when you walk in. I'll give somebody else a chance now.
I want to add on to that interview piece, and I love what Melissa said. Like, have questions, right? If it's a two-way street. As much as the company is interviewing you as a candidate is also interviewing the company to know if this is a right fit for you. My rule of thumb is don't listen to Google. If I'm HR interviewing you, I ask you 10 questions, you have every right to ask me 10 questions. There's no rule. And I know Google will tell you, hey, only ask 3 or 5. Why? If you want to ask 20 questions, ask me 20 questions. I would never ever discredit a candidate. I would discredit a candidate if they didn't ask me questions. If you ask me questions, I love you already. I'm like, great, bring it, right? Now, what the reason people don't ask the right questions or the questions is they don't have self-awareness. They don't know what they want. They don't know what type of companies they want to work for. Characteristics wise, values wise, how do you want to feel at company? What's your emotions that you want to feel? You're going to be working in this company for 40 plus hours a day. A week. 60. I know so many people working 10, 12 hours right now during this pandemic, right? So what do you want to feel? What's the emotions you want to feel when you're at work? How do you want your manager to treat you? Do you want a manager to micromanage you? There's people that need micromanagement. I can't work for a manager that's going to micromanage me. Do you want a manager to give you autonomy? Do you want to lead? You have to first take a step back and ask yourself, before you go to any interviews or you even go to any job searching process, sit there, do some soul searching, ask yourself, what's your dream job look like? What type of company you want to work for, not not company titles, actual characteristics of the company, values, mission statements. What should they stand for? How do you want to feel? Same thing with the manager. I used to do this as a job seeker because I've had great bosses. I've also had not so good bosses, right? And your boss will make your life great at work and can make your life hell at work. Your boss can make your career or break your career, because I've been fortunate that I had great bosses, and I know other people that didn't have such great bosses, and you can see the difference, right?
And it's totally your right in the interview to ask your boss self-awareness questions about them, right? So you can say, what are you working on as a leader, right? So what would you say your greatest strength is as a boss? Where's something that you're working on? And the really great response to that is the answers kind of don't matter. It's how do they respond to the question? And if they've got an openness and a humility and a humor about it, and they're like, oh, you know what? I just go too fast, and I know that, and my team gets that, and my team is so great in helping me slow down a little bit for them. You know, right there, that's someone you want to work with, because even when they're pushing you, they're aware that might how it's impacting, right? So the same kind of questions, behavioral questions they're asking you, you have every right to ask back. And I think that's an important way to look at it, to delineate of what are they asking you? Go ahead and ask them back.
That's an excellent point, and I love that. Gil, did you have any insights on this topic?
No, not as many around the job hunting and all of that. No, I'm really enjoying listening to all of these insights. I appreciate it. So, no, thank you. And I'm glad Amber finally got to speak out what she had to say, because I think all of us were wanted to hear, especially on that topic. So I'm grateful that she finally got to speak. Finally got to get that.
I do want to touch on another topic. It's within the realm of the things we were going to talk about, but that toxic positivity, right? Because there's the artificial harmony, and then there's the I'm just always so happy all the time difference, right? So share your thoughts on that hyper positivity.
So if I may go first on this one, my default is absolute sun, right? I am just a positive person. And so I've always had to ask myself, am I really positive, or is it just, a mask? And it's important to have that self-awareness. And I think everything that we're talking about goes back into that emotional intelligence, right? Did that MBA get promoted, and now this person who is a great individual contributor who should have stayed there and is now a leader of people get there because, they perform so well, or they just have the paper, or is the person an actual leader, or are you able to be self-aware and say, okay, my default is to pretend like everything's okay. Can I sit with myself and realize that it's not? And that's a real hard thing to do if you are naturally positive. So tips and tricks, of course, is listen again to your gut, right? Because it is going to tell you. If you start getting a stomach ache before you're going into a meeting, or a stomach ache before you go to work, that's a problem. So I'll always push into absolutely. If you're feeling physical ailments, it's probably something going on mentally. Not always, but sometimes.
Oh, I agree with that. I remember there was a time where I worked for someone who just was not a good fit for me, where I would perpetually have a sore throat. All the things I couldn't say were right there in my sore throat. And it wasn't until after I left that sore throat went away. And I was there for a really long time to have a sore throat, ridiculous. So there's a question here. How do you handle conflict in your team? Would you suggest someone, and I think that's one of the questions you guys threw out there as one of the questions to ask, how do you handle conflict in your team? I've asked that before, and I find a lot of people don't answer it. Even people who I perceive as like pretty great, they don't answer it.
Okay,
And so
I'd like to speak up on that one then,
Yeah.
because I literally just came from a week of running a behavioral interviewing course, and this is something I've been doing my whole career. You have to change the way you ask the question. You have to change the way I ask you questions. So first of all, a good behavioral question is not a question, it's an interrogative statement. It ends with a period. So you say, describe a major conflict that you had to work through in the last few months. Tell me about a time where you had two employees who had adamant disagreement about X, Y, or Z. Framing it in a way where you're not asking them, how do you? They can talk about a hypothetical. Oh, we deal with it great. We get the two people together and we have them really hash it out, and it's no problem. Whereas if you force them into talking about a specific example, a specific scenario, and that way you'll get the behavioral insights into what they're going through. Because like Larissa said, you want to ask, why are they asking these questions? Well, one of the questions they should be asking are around behaviors. And to Amber's point, you know, to being insightful and knowing what you're looking for. Well, part of that is knowing what are the behaviors that you're looking for. And so if you're looking for a person who sweeps conflict under the rug, well, they're going to tell you the conflict doesn't exist. Or you're looking for somebody who knows how to understand both sides, express the empathy to bring the people together, creates a positive interdependence to create a better outcome, whatever it might be. You have, if you're getting non-answers, you need to change the way you ask the question.
I'm just going to give you big claps for that. Yay.
Yeah, no, that was so good.
Too.
Because when, you know, and it's funny because when I think of behavioral questions, I think about the people that I ask when I interview, as opposed to using behavioral questions on the flip side when I'm a job seeker. And so that is such a really awesome point there. So thank you for that, Gil.
You know, if as a candidate you're asking this question and the manager's flip-flopping and doesn't want to answer, that's your red flag right there. You got to be able to, that's why it's important as a candidate to ask questions too, because the body language, the energy, how they're answering the question would give you a lot of hints, and you should be able to pick up the red flags. And when I'm coaching job seekers or like career professionals on this side, I always say, you know, I love what Melissa said. I'm not for everyone. And that's the truth. Even I have recognized that over the years that I'm not for everyone. I'm not for everyone for HR. I'm not everyone's coach. And I openly say this now. I'm not a coach for everyone, but I am a right coach for somebody. Right. But you got to be able to, like, just like I can identify who's my ideal client, you as a candidate should be identifying who's your ideal company, ideal manager, because you need to, again, it goes back to you. I always believe as an individual, we are in the power. We are always in the power. And I tell this to job seekers and career professionals, when you are looking for a job, you are in the power. Don't think the company's in the power. You're in the power. They need you more than you need them. They need you. They need to make money in their businesses. They need the right talent. But you have that power. But the minute you own that power, then you can have those great discussions in the interviews. You can ask the right questions. But when you are going into the mode that I need a job, you're not going to ask any questions. You just want the job, right? And I understand everyone's situation is different and you may just want the job. But start doing that self-awareness about who you are. And that's, I love what Melissa said. I'm not the right person for everybody. And I'm not either. But you need to know that, right? Self-awareness.
Well, and there's just so many tools. I mean, I just did something called UMAP with a woman named Lori Knutson that I'll shoot the link if anyone's curious. It was awesome. There's so many, you know, and like Enneagrams come and go, like Myers-Briggs comes, they all have their issues. Like none of them are perfect. But what I've found is if you do a strengths finder, if you do, you know, just pick 5 of them and do them and look at the thread and be honest with yourself. You know, there's things that there's sometimes it's my time to shine. And sometimes I will fall on my face. And just like you want a leader to be honest, about the culture they're setting and what are they modeling and what are they measuring and what are their KPIs, all of that stuff. It's unrealistic to ask someone else to bring that if you're not willing to bring it yourself. That's just, this is a 50-something-year-old woman talking, like, which is, and it's usually easier said than done, because there's always parts of us, we all have a dark side, right? That we all have things that we maybe don't want to face. But I've found that starting on myself, fully understanding like my values, what are my need to haves and my nice to haves, what are my deal breakers, and rather than a lot of people go negative and they'll look for red flags or they'll look for deal breakers. I've had a much better result when I go positive and literally do the exercise of what is my dream job, almost vision boarding it out. Like, what do I want? How much do I want to make? What does the culture look like? Who do I report to? Take the time to sit with that and be honest with yourself. I've found that gets me much better outcomes when I'm in the job market.
That's the first exercise I make people do in my boot camp.
Really interesting. So
we're exact exercise.
And I just one last quick one is that as a counterpoint to something, I don't want to say that the job seeker is in the power position. That when I'm working in that world, it's equal. It's like sales, right? Like both people, you are peer to peer at this point. And so that exercise that Melissa just described, that helps you kind of flesh out what you want. So you walk in there peer to peer, asking great questions, and there's no pull for power. But that's just my take on it.
No, I meant it in a way that not that meaning like a lot of people don't understand that they're also in power, right? So I meant it in own your power, know who you are, what you want. And then the other thing is when you go into these job interviews, it's a conversation. It's a two-way street. They need you, you need, like, you're there to solve a problem. And they have a problem, and that's a selling future, right? Goes back to sales. But yeah, I agree with you. It's an equal power, but a lot of job seekers don't understand that they also have the power to go into the interviews, ask the questions. A lot of people think that they shouldn't be asking questions. They should only ask maybe 3 questions because that's what Google said. I'm going to go back.
And I appreciate that. So I don't know what that means. Equivalation. So Larissa, you laughed, so you must know. So.
Quivit Consulting. That's me. Revelation, equivalation. Chris and I go. He's a client of mine, and we go way back. So
I figured it was something like this. So look, I want to ask the panel one question because I had gotten a piece of advice from a leadership training program that I'd love your insights on. But then what I'll do is go around to everyone and you can give us any final thoughts on the topic or anything you'd like to share. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. So I went to a leadership training program and they suggested I write an about me page. And this about me thing, they suggested, that I'd be very vulnerable and that I share a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff. And I did it. I did it, and I provided it to a couple people to create that. Look, I'm being vulnerable. Let's have some psychological safety and share with me because I'm going to share with you and I care. And I think that was a bad idea. So tell me, what do you think?
But why do you think it was a bad idea?
Because I felt very exposed. And it's okay. It's okay to be exposed. But I don't know if it was a good idea. So you guys are the people I would ask.
So 100% it depends on the facilitation and context and what is done with the information. So you shared a story with me that once you guys had to put up a whole bunch of stuff and then it went badly, right? There are some things where it causes fighting. If the information is used and taken and kind of broken down and shared and repackaged together for good action, I think it's a really great way to do it and to build trust and build trust quickly. If that isn't the case and that facilitator doesn't know how to do that, it can be disastrous. So that's my take.
By Gil's expression on his face, I really want to know what Gil thinks because of that expression. That was just
it sounds like it could theoretically be done well, albeit it feels very unnatural to me just conceptually. But it sounds like also the way it was done in such an imbalanced fashion, the fact that it was you and other people, it wasn't part of a broader system, it wasn't part of a structure to it. It was just, okay, here, I'm going to open up to you now, tell me how you feel. It to me, without further context, it does feel like the facilitator missed an opportunity to have that done in a way where it feels more like a sharing together, as opposed to, I'm going to open myself up to you and hope you respond in kind. That sort of, and so that's why I was agreeing with everything Larissa was saying, because it was just really, it's about the context there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it goes along, right? So what we're talking about is always just human interaction, right? And whether it's a micro or a macro, an organization is going to be the macro, right? So, it goes into exactly what Gil was saying and Larissa, right? So if you're in a relationship with someone and you're the first person who says, I love you, and then they don't say it for 2 weeks, ooh, that's harsh, right? But that's, maybe you're on different pages. So yeah, if you share a lot of vulnerable information with someone who's A, not prepared to receive it, or B, not prepared to reciprocate it, that's going to leave you feeling vulnerable and exposed. So, being wise with the people you talk to is also very, very important.
I agree with everybody so far. Everybody has said everything. I'm just gonna add on, say, just piggyback from all three of you guys. It's the objective, right? What was the objective behind this exercise? Was that communicated to everybody before doing the exercise? Now, sharing with the team, was that communicated to what context, and why are we going to be sharing it, right? So I'm going to go back to what everybody said too. It comes down to what Larissa said, the contents, right? So what was the objective? Now, I am vulnerable on my own platform. That's my choice. Someone's not telling me to do it. I want to do it, right? This is an exercise. So it goes back to, why? Like, what was the objective behind it? And then if you felt that I shared too much and now I think I shouldn't have, then it goes back to what Gail was saying earlier. Like, now you feel negative about it. Why? Right? So I clearly, maybe the why was not communicated properly to why this exercise is being done and the objective behind it, and what was the goal behind it? What was the facilitator going to accomplish?
Yeah, no, those are excellent points. We're already past 8, so I'd like to go around and have everyone share some final thoughts, but I am so grateful for this conversation. I think it was really good. I hope the audience got a lot of value out of it. If you did, please let us know. I would love to hear that in the comments. If you like these types of conversations, I'd love to know that too. But everybody, we'll start with Larissa. Any final thoughts, advice, anything you want to share?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing with this is start small, right? So there was a question way back of how, if you're feeling this, how do you get out of it? And especially if you're not in a position to be able to leave your job, because that sometimes you just aren't, or you don't want to. There's a lot of it that you like. I would start really small, and I would start within your team, and I would start one-on-one, not as a way to strategize or collude, but as a way to connect and open up. So tiny bites. So, and like LinkedIn user. Yeah, I do, but I'm also fully transparent. I that's a big bulk of my business. So yeah, start small and be curious with each other and give grace. Number one, big one is give grace. We make a lot of assumptions about how other people behave and why they behave that way. And if you replace your assumptions with your curiosity, I promise your world will open up.
That's beautiful. That's all I have to say about that. Gil.
My
Any
comment's a
thoughts
lot
for
less
you?
beautiful. I just want to say that there are a lot of executives on teams that I've worked with over my career that I wish would have this streamlined into their brain in this conversation, because they're the people who are on the other side of that artificial harmony, who beat people down and think everything's fine when they everything's clearly not fine. So I just want to say that there are a lot of executives that need to hear this, because they're the ones who are in a position of power, creating an experience that is negative. You know, Jen, like you were saying, you feel health issues, right? It's not just, oh, I'm down about it. Oh, this is frustrating. It's you feel genuine health issues. You lose sleep. You know, I often say the unofficial measure of a bad employee experience is the feeling people have on Sunday evening, right? Because that will tell you what your reaction is to the week. If you're feeling that feeling in the pit of your stomach and you're dreading your week, well, that should be a message to you right there. So not full of positivity like Larissa, but I will say that.
Well, I mean, they're excellent points. I was just, she just put it that so beautifully, but you make some excellent points and I appreciate your insights. So, Amber, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Not really. Just thanks for having this panel, and thanks for talking about it. I think if to piggyback on Larissa's statement about grace, I learned really quickly when I was a teenager that I was freaked out because everybody was looking at what I was wearing or looking at my hair, and it turns out nobody was paying attention. Nobody cared. They were all worried about their hair and the way they looked, and so yeah, the whole grace thing and understanding where other people are coming from is probably the biggest piece of the puzzle. Also,
that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for participating. Melissa, any final thoughts from you?
No, I love the stay curious. One thing I've learned, don't be attached to outcomes, right? If I need to have a conversation with Gil, don't get attached to how I want it to go. Stay in the moment, stay in my body, be honest and open and curious, and stay in the conversation. Listen for conclusions like, oh, everything sucks, or this will never work. Well, that's a conclusion. So how do we know that, right? Listen to in your own brain and listen for other people saying them. And then I don't want to, we're already over time, so I could talk about this all night. Like, I love this stuff.
It's okay. You know, and when I do an hour episode, I typically go a little bit over every time, but even with a bigger panel. So I think, you know, we shared a lot of different things, and I think hopefully it's helpful to people. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you everyone who's joining us live. I mean, let me know if you got value out of it. Sharing is caring. We like little hearts and like little emoticon things, and you know, insightful. Any of that stuff is just awesome. Next week, I've got Morgan Ingram, who is coming to join me to talk about discovery call therapy. So the way I met Morgan was he did a discovery call with me, that with my basically my peer. So I had a sales leader, I was the sales development leader. And we legit did therapy without Morgan really realizing it. But, you know, it's an interesting story. I think any good discovery call is really like therapy. I think it's going to be fun. And then ladies happy hours, April 21st. And it's going to be the moms. So, you know, all of how to balance everything and those unique challenges being women in the workplace. So thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you. Remember, sharing is caring. Bye.